Blood splattered across Lieutenant General Vanessa Wright's Medal of Honor as Officer Bradley Reeves pressed his gun against her temple during her son's military funeral at Jefferson Memorial Cemetery. Cameras flashed, capturing the white officer's aggression toward the highest-ranking black female officer in Army history. Through tears, as 20 armed officers watched silently, Vanessa whispered, "Not today." She reached for her son's folded flag as Officer Reeves's finger tightened on the trigger. A single gunshot echoed across hallowed ground. Lieutenant General Vanessa Wright stared through the airplane window as her flight descended toward Houston International Airport. The weight of grief pressed against her chest like a physical force. Her son, Marcus Wright, an Army captain deployed to Afghanistan, would never come home alive again. Vanessa had commanded troops through 3 wars, earned the nation's highest military honors, and risen through ranks where few black women had ever been permitted. None of that prepared her for burying her only son. She straightened her decorated uniform, a habit formed through decades of military discipline. The uniform had always been her armor, but today it felt like it might crack under the pressure of her personal loss. The brief moment of normality ended abruptly at the security checkpoint. "Random additional screening required," announced Officer Bradley Reeves, a stocky white man with cold eyes that never quite met hers. "But I've already cleared security before my connecting flight," Vanessa explained calmly, presenting her military ID and papers. "And I'm on urgent family business," Reeves smirked, examining her ID with exaggerated scrutiny. "This looks fake to me. A black woman as Lieutenant General? How do I know you didn't steal this uniform?" The surrounding travelers fell silent, uncomfortable witnesses to the unfolding scene. Vanessa had encountered racism throughout her 30-year military career, but rarely so blatant. "Officer, I assure you my credentials are in order. I'm here to bury my son who died serving this country." "Likely story," Reeves retorted, signaling to other officers. "We need to verify your identity. Step aside for enhanced questioning." What should have been a 5-minute process stretched into 2 humiliating hours. Reeves demanded she remove her jacket with the medals, questioned every document, and repeatedly suggested her uniform was stolen property. When Vanessa's daughter Amara arrived looking for her, Reeves threatened to arrest her too for interfering with security procedures. Finally released without apology, Vanessa immediately sought the security supervisor to file a complaint. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," the supervisor warned quietly. Officer Reeves has friends throughout the department. Complaints have a way of becoming arrests for disorderly conduct. As they left the airport, Amara, already in lawyer mode, fumed. "Mom, we should fight this." "I can file," Vanessa cut her off gently. "Right now we focus on Marcus. We honor your brother. That's our priority." What Vanessa couldn't know was that Officer Bradley Reeves watched them leave, making a call on his personal phone. Target confirmed. "The general is here." On the other end, a voice replied, "Good work. The Gatekeepers send their regards." The Wright family home in Houston's historic 3rd Ward stood as a monument to black excellence and service. Photos of 3 generations in military uniform lined the walls. Medals, citations, and honors testified to a family that had repeatedly answered their country's call, despite that country's reluctance to recognize their humanity. As relatives and Marcus's fellow soldiers gathered the day before the funeral, Vanessa found moments alone in her childhood bedroom. Here, surrounded by remnants of her youth, she allowed herself to weep for the first time since receiving notification of Marcus's death. A knock at the door revealed her father, Calvin Wright. Leaning on his cane, the 78-year-old Vietnam veteran still carried himself with military bearing despite his weakened legs. "They told me it was enemy fire that took him," Calvin said without preamble. "I don't believe it for a second." "Dad, what are you saying?" "The official report was doctored," Calvin interrupted, pulling an envelope from his pocket. "This came for you 2 days ago. I nearly opened it myself." The envelope contained a thumb drive and a note in Marcus's handwriting. "If anything happens to me, give this to Mom. Trust no one in uniform except her." Vanessa's hands trembled as she plugged the drive into her laptop. What appeared were dozens of meticulously organized files documenting a disturbing pattern. Black service members returning to Houston faced systematic harassment, false arrests, employment discrimination, and occasionally violence from a network of police officers calling themselves the Gatekeepers. Marcus had been investigating them for months. He said something wasn't right, Calvin explained. Said black vets were being targeted, especially officers. Started collecting stories, evidence. As Vanessa scrolled through the files, a photo made her breath catch. Officer Bradley Reeves from the airport appeared in several surveillance images, often at gatherings with other officers. One folder labeled Command Structure contained redacted personnel files, indicating the Gatekeepers had access to official records. A soft knock interrupted her discovery. Amara entered with a stranger, a young Asian American police officer, who looked nervously over his shoulder. "Mom, this is Officer James Chen. He worked with Marcus on this investigation." Chen spoke hurriedly. "Captain Wright contacted me 6 months ago after his friend was beaten nearly to death by officers during a traffic stop. The department called it resisting arrest, but the victim was a decorated Black Navy commander." Marcus recognized a pattern. Chen showed them his own badge. "I've been gathering evidence from inside, but it's dangerous. The Gatekeepers have members throughout the department, courthouse, even military liaison offices." Vanessa's grief temporarily receded, replaced by a cold clarity. "What exactly are you saying, Officer Chen?" Chen lowered his voice. "Your son discovered the Gatekeepers were specifically targeting black military personnel for harassment and, worse, they see black advancement in the military as a threat to what they call proper order. Marcus was getting close to identifying their leadership. But that doesn't explain why he was killed in Afghanistan," Amara objected. Chen looked grim. "Captain Wright's last message to me suggested someone had arranged for his unit to be sent into an unsuitable position. He suspected his deployment orders were manipulated to place him directly in harm's way." Vanessa stared at a final folder on the drive labeled Pentagon Connections. Inside was correspondence indicating someone with access to military deployment. Orders had deliberately placed Marcus's unit in danger after receiving communications from Houston. The implications were staggering. The Gatekeepers' reach extended beyond local police into military command structures. Her son hadn't just died in combat. He had been deliberately positioned to be killed. As she processed this revelation, her military training took over. "We need to secure this evidence and contact my connections at the Pentagon immediately." Inside Houston Police Department headquarters, the official narrative of community service and equal justice played out in public areas. Behind secured doors and in private clubs across the city, the Gatekeepers operated with impunity. Officer Bradley Reeves sat in the wood-paneled back room of Lyndon's Bar and Grill, a known gathering spot for officers after hours. Around him sat 6 other members of their inner circle, each with at least 15 years on the force. The air was thick with cigar smoke and unspoken understanding as Chief Robert Gaines entered. At 60, Gaines had perfected the public persona of a progressive police leader while privately ensuring the department maintained its traditional values. He nodded curtly at the assembled men. "We have a situation," Gaines announced, sliding photographs across the table. Lieutenant General Vanessa Wright's face stared up from official military portraits and surveillance photos. "Our airport welcome wasn't enough to discourage the general. She's making calls to Washington." Reeves leaned forward. "Let me handle this, Chief. We've dealt with uppity soldiers before." "This isn't some random sergeant," Gaines cautioned. "This woman has the president's ear and a chest full of medals. More importantly, she's Marcus Wright's mother." A murmur passed through the group. Marcus Wright's name had become problematic in their circles before his convenient deployment. "She's going to be at Jefferson Memorial tomorrow for the funeral," Gaines continued. "Perfect opportunity to send a message." Reeves smiled coldly. "I'll need security detail assignment for the cemetery." The afternoon sun beat down on Jefferson Memorial Cemetery as Vanessa Wright's car approached the ornate gates. This prestigious burial ground housed generations of Texas military heroes, its manicured lawns and marble monuments testifying to sacrifices made in America's wars. Vanessa, had arranged for her son to be buried with full military honors in the section reserved for Afghanistan war casualties. As a captain who died in combat and the son of a lieutenant general, Marcus Wright deserved nothing less. By 9 a.m., mourners began arriving. Hundreds came to honor Marcus, fellow soldiers, veterans, family, friends, community members, and military leadership. Media vans lined the cemetery entrance, the funeral of a decorated captain who was also the son of one of the highest-ranking black women in military history, drawing national attention. Vanessa immediately noticed the police presence. Officer Bradley Reeves and approximately 20 officers had established security checkpoints at all cemetery entrances. What troubled her was their selective enforcement. White mourners passed through with cursory checks while black attendees faced extended questioning, bag searches, and in some cases were turned away for security concerns. When a group of Marcus's black unit members objected to this treatment, they were threatened with arrest. By the time the funeral was scheduled to begin at 10 a.m., Reeves and his officers had effectively segregated the ceremony. White attendees were seated close to the burial site while black mourners were corralled behind barricades at a distance, many unable to properly see or hear the proceedings. Vanessa observed this orchestrated humiliation with cold fury, but maintained her composure. This was about Marcus, not the provocations of the gatekeepers. Taking her place beside her father, Calvin, and daughter Amara, Vanessa prepared to honor her son while the cameras rolled. The ceremony began with military precision. The chaplain spoke of sacrifice and service. Fellow officers shared memories of Marcus's leadership and compassion. Throughout, Vanessa sat ramrod straight, the perfect image of military bearing despite the visible police interference at the ceremony's edges. When it came time for her to speak, Vanessa approached the podium with measured steps. Dozens of cameras captured her image as she stood before her son's flag-draped coffin. "My son," she began, her voice strong despite her grief, "believed in an America worth fighting for, worth dying for. He believed in a country that could live up to its highest ideals of equality and justice for all its citizens." As she spoke, she noticed Officer Reeves moving closer, speaking into his radio. Other officers began positioning themselves around the ceremony's perimeter. Marcus saw injustice and refused to look away. Vanessa continued. He confronted inequity wherever he found it, believing that true patriotism means holding your country accountable to its promises. Mourners nodded in agreement, many wiping away tears. "His final message to me," Vanessa said, producing a letter from her pocket, "arrived after his death. In it, he wrote about his concerns regarding systematic targeting of black service members." A murmur passed through the crowd. Officer Reeves took another step closer, his hand now resting on his holstered weapon. Vanessa read from Marcus's letter. "Mom, what I've discovered goes beyond ordinary racism. There are organized efforts to undermine black military advancement, to intimidate and threaten those who serve with honor while black. I've documented names, incidents, patterns. If anything happens to me, this information must reach the proper authorities." As she finished reading, the honor guard approached with the ceremonial folded flag. The lead soldier, a white sergeant who had served with Marcus, presented it to Vanessa with formal precision. "On behalf of the President of the United States Army, and a grateful nation, please accept this flag as a symbol of our appreciation for your loved one's honorable and faithful service." Vanessa reached for the flag with trembling hands, the first crack in her composure visible only to those closest to her. It was at this precise moment that Officer Reeves made his move. Striding forward with unwarranted urgency, he pushed past the honor guard members, his hand now drawing his weapon. "General Wright," he announced loudly, "you need to come with me immediately." The crowd gasped as Reeves pressed his gun against Vanessa's temple, the barrel cold against her skin. Blood from a small cut caused by the gun's sight dripped onto her Medal of Honor. "This black thinks she's untouchable," Reeves snarled, loud enough for nearby mourners and microphones to pick up. "Time you learned your place." The cemetery fell into stunned silence. 20 armed gatekeeper officers stood watching, none intervening as their colleague held a gun to a general's head during her son's funeral. Through tears she could no longer contain, Vanessa whispered, "Not today." With military discipline ingrained, through decades of service she continued reaching for her son's folded flag, refusing to cower despite the weapon pressed against her head. Her fingers had just touched the flag's edge when Officer Reeves's finger tightened on the trigger. A single gunshot echoed across Jefferson Memorial Cemetery, shattering the sacred silence of hallowed ground. The gunshot came not from Reeves's weapon but from his partner, Officer Wilson, who had fired into the air while shouting, "She's reaching for a weapon!" In the ensuing chaos, Reeves tackled Vanessa to the ground, her son's flag falling into the dirt beside the grave. "Weapon! She's armed!" Reeves screamed, though Vanessa had been visibly empty-handed throughout the ceremony. Amara's voice cut through the pandemonium. "It's on video! Everything's on video!" Indeed, dozens of phones and professional cameras had captured the entire incident. Nevertheless, Reeves wrenched Vanessa's arms behind her back, kneeling on her spine as he cuffed her. "Lieutenant General Vanessa Wright, you're under arrest for assaulting a police officer and attempting to draw a weapon at a public gathering." The absurdity of the charge was eclipsed by the shocking visual. A decorated general in full dress uniform, face pressed into cemetery soil beside her son's open grave, being handcuffed while still crying. Calvin Wright, despite his age and weakened legs, lunged toward Reeves but was immediately restrained by two other officers. Amara, trying to reach her mother, was shoved backward so violently she stumbled into mourners. Marcus's fellow soldiers moved forward as one, their military training evident in their coordinated approach, but stopped when multiple officers drew weapons. "Anyone interferes, they go down," shouted Officer Wilson, his gun now pointed at the crowd. As Vanessa was roughly hauled to her feet, a commanding voice cut through the chaos. "What in God's name is happening here?" A tall black man in an impeccable suit pushed through the crowd, flanked by two individuals displaying federal credentials. "FBI Agent Dominic Carter," he announced, his badge extended. "Someone explain why a lieutenant general is being arrested at her son's funeral." Reeves kept his grip on Vanessa's arm. "This is a local police matter. The subject was reaching for a concealed weapon." "That's a lie!" shouted multiple witnesses simultaneously. Carter's eyes narrowed. "I see no weapon. Release the general immediately." "We have procedures," Reeves insisted. "She'll be processed downtown like anyone else." Carter stepped closer. "I'm here investigating potential civil rights violations within Houston law enforcement. What I'm witnessing appears to confirm my suspicions." He gestured to his colleagues. "We'll take custody of General Wright." "No," Reeves replied flatly. "She's our arrest." In the confusion that followed, Vanessa was dragged away from her son's unfinished funeral, still handcuffed and forced into a police cruiser. One of her medals was torn from her uniform in the process. Agent Carter immediately began collecting witness information, while Amara called every legal and media contact in her network. By the time Vanessa arrived at Harris County Jail, the first videos of the incident had already reached social media. One particularly clear recording, taken by a veteran who had hidden his phone, showed the entire sequence. Reeves approaching unprovoked, drawing his weapon, pressing it against Vanessa's head, Wilson firing to create confusion, and the fabricated claims of a weapon. The veteran had managed to upload it before his phone was confiscated. Inside the jail processing area, Vanessa maintained her dignity despite the deliberate humiliations. Officers denied her request to change out of her uniform, forced her to undergo multiple unnecessary searches, and lost her paperwork repeatedly to extend her detention. "You think those stars on your shoulder mean anything in here?" sneered the booking officer, deliberately mishandling her fingerprinting to require multiple attempts. "Just another black criminal to us." 4 hours into her detention, still denied. Her phone call, Vanessa heard a commotion in the jail's reception area. Agent Carter's authoritative voice carried down the hallway, demanding to see her immediately. The jail supervisor refused, citing ongoing processing. Meanwhile, outside the jail, an extraordinary scene unfolded. News of General Wright's arrest had spread with unprecedented speed. Hundreds of veterans, many in uniform, had surrounded the building. Military personnel from nearby bases arrived in growing numbers, standing in silent formation. They made no threats, attempted no interference, but their message was clear. One of their own was being mistreated, and they were bearing witness. Inside her holding cell, Vanessa finally understood the gatekeepers' true objective. This wasn't just about intimidation. It was about public humiliation, calculated to diminish her stature and undermine her credibility before she could expose their network. She was in the system now, and the system was designed to break even the strongest spirits. But what the gatekeepers hadn't anticipated was that their very public assault on a decorated officer would ignite a firestorm of outrage. The holding cell at Harris County Jail was deliberately intimidating. Stark concrete, harsh lighting, and the persistent sounds of desperation from nearby cells. Vanessa Wright sat perfectly straight on the metal bench, still in her now soiled dress uniform. After 6 hours of processing, she had been denied her constitutional right to a phone call, medical attention for the cut on her temple, and basics, dignity. The door clanged open as a corrections officer entered. Her nameplate read Jackson. Unlike the others, she avoided eye contact, her movements suggesting internal conflict. "General Wright, you're being transferred to the general population," she stated flatly, though her voice held a hint of apology. Vanessa stood, military-bearing automatic even now. "Officer Jackson, I have rights as a detainee that are being systematically violated. I request my phone call immediately." Jackson glanced nervously at the camera in the corner. "Judge Hartman has denied bail pending arraignment. You're classified as a security risk." The mention of Judge William Hartman sent a chill through Vanessa. Marcus's files had identified him as a judge who consistently delivered harsher sentences to minorities, particularly black defendants with military backgrounds. His involvement confirmed the conspiracy extended into the judiciary. "A security risk?" Vanessa questioned calmly. "On what grounds?" Jackson lowered her voice. "They're claiming you attempted to assault Officer Reeves with a concealed weapon at a public gathering. The charge has been elevated to attempted murder of a police officer. The absurdity of the charge would have been laughable if the consequences weren't so serious. Maximum security holding, no bail, limited legal access, all designed to isolate and pressure her." Officer Jackson returned during night shift. This time with a burner phone hidden in a food tray. "5 minutes," she whispered. "I can't lose my job, but this isn't right." Vanessa called Amara immediately. "Mom, thank God we've been frantic. There's a media firestorm about your arrest. The videos are everywhere." "Listen carefully," Vanessa instructed. "Judge Hartman is involved with the gatekeepers. They're trying to keep me isolated. Contact Agent Carter with the FBI and tell him to check Marcus's files about judicial connections." "We're working on it," Amara assured her. "The Pentagon has called repeatedly. Your commanding officer is furious. Veterans are still surrounding the jail. We'll have you out by morning." By the third morning, Vanessa was awakened by unusual activity. Guards were moving with urgency, radios crackling with tense communications. The supervisor who had searched her area appeared visibly angry. "Wright, gather your things. Court order for your release has been signed." Outside the jail, Vanessa emerged into blinding sunlight and an even more stunning sight. Hundreds of people lined the street, many in military uniform, others holding signs demanding justice. Veterans stood at attention, saluting as she appeared. Media cameras captured her walk to freedom, still in her soiled dress uniform, head high despite her ordeal. Amara rushed forward, embracing her mother. "A federal judge overruled Hartman. Agent Carter got involved personally." As they moved toward a waiting car, Vanessa noticed Officer Jackson watching from a side entrance. Their eyes met briefly, an unspoken understanding passing between them. Inside the system, even amid corruption, allies could be found. The steps of the federal courthouse in downtown Houston became the stage for an impromptu press conference as Lieutenant General Vanessa Wright emerged from 3 days of unjust detention. Despite her ordeal, she had managed to shower and change into a fresh uniform, her medals restored to their rightful places, "I stand before you today," she began, her voice steady despite her exhaustion, "as both a grieving mother and a soldier who has sworn an oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the gathered faces. "What happened at my son's funeral, a funeral that remains unfinished, represents a domestic threat to the principles I have defended for 30 years across 3 continents." As she spoke, reactions poured in from across the country. Military leaders issued statements of support. Veterans groups announced protests at police departments nationwide. Politicians scrambled to position themselves, many calling for federal investigations. During her press conference, the phone rang. The caller ID displayed the White House switchboard. Without missing a beat, Vanessa answered on speakerphone, allowing the crowd and media to witness the conversation. "Lieutenant General Wright speaking." "General Wright, please hold for the President of the United States." The crowd murmured in surprise as the president's voice emerged clearly through the phone speaker. "General Wright, the nation has watched with horror and outrage as you've been subjected to treatment unbecoming how we should honor those who serve. I've directed the Justice Department to launch a full investigation into both your son's death and the events at his funeral. Officer Reeves and all officers involved have been suspended pending federal review. The investigation moved with unprecedented speed. Officer Bradley Reeves and 7 other officers had been suspended pending investigation. Police Chief Gaines held a press conference distancing the department from the actions of a few officers, while promising full cooperation with federal authorities. Agent Dominic Carter of the FBI announced the formation of a special task force to investigate potential civil rights violations and organized discrimination against minority service members. For the Gatekeepers, the public exposure represented an existential threat. Decades of operating in shadows had been shattered by the powerful imagery of a gun held to a general's head at her son's funeral. Yet even as public opinion solidified against them, they were not without resources and powerful allies. That night, as Vanessa finally returned to her family home under FBI protection, she received a cryptic text message from Officer Jackson. "Be careful, they're not done. Check your military records tomorrow." The warning proved prescient. By morning, troubling, reports began circulating questioning Vanessa's military record and psychological stability. Anonymous sources claimed she had been under investigation for irregularities in command decisions. Military blogs with connections to white nationalist groups began suggesting her son's death had been due to her affirmative action promotion. Creating poor strategic leadership, a coordinated counterattack had begun. The smear campaign against Lieutenant General Vanessa Wright unfolded with military precision, suggesting coordination far beyond a local police department's capabilities. Within 48 hours of her release from jail, carefully crafted narratives questioning her military record, mental stability, and even her son's service record appeared simultaneously across multiple platforms. Conservative news outlets reported anonymous Pentagon sources expressing concerns about her leadership history. Social media accounts with suspicious creation dates amplified these claims with manufactured evidence, doctored performance reviews, manipulated photographs, and out-of-context quotes. Vanessa watched these developments from her family home, now under FBI protection after credible death threats. Agent Dominic Carter showed her the latest intelligence during their morning briefing. "They're well-organized and well-funded," he explained, displaying a network diagram of connected entities. "This goes beyond a local police brotherhood. We're seeing coordination with certain political groups, media outlets, and even military contractors." Amara entered with her laptop. "Mom, something's happening with your security clearance. Pentagon contacts say it's under administrative review due to new information of concern." This development confirmed Vanessa's suspicions. The Gatekeepers' influence extended into federal systems, including military personnel records. Only someone with significant authority could initiate a security clearance review for a lieutenant general. Her phone rang. Her commanding officer, General Richards. "Vanessa, I'm calling as a courtesy before it becomes official. The secretary is temporarily suspending your active status pending investigation of new allegations." His discomfort was evident. "My hands are tied on this. There's pressure coming from somewhere high up. Political pressure? Vanessa asked, already knowing. The answer? The highest levels, Richards confirmed quietly. Someone wants you neutralized and they have the connections to make it happen. Watch yourself. The revelation came during a closed-door fundraising event at an exclusive Houston country club. Senator Howard Maxwell, the 70-year-old senior senator from Texas, addressed a room of wealthy donors. "Our way of life is under attack," he declared to murmurs of agreement. General Wright represents a dangerous element using tragic circumstances to undermine proper authority and traditional values. What neither Maxwell nor his audience knew was that one of the catering staff was an FBI informant wearing a recording device. The senator continued, revealing damning information. "The gatekeepers have served as an important check on certain elements getting above themselves for decades. I helped establish their organization back when I was police commissioner, and I've supported their mission throughout my political career." Within hours, carefully selected evidence had been delivered to the Department of Justice, military investigators, and trusted media contacts. The counteroffensive had begun. Dawn broke over Houston with the wail of sirens and the whirring of helicopter blades. FBI teams simultaneously executed search warrants at the homes of Chief Gaines, Officer Reeves, and 18 other confirmed gatekeepers. Local news captured footage of police officers being led away in handcuffs, while federal agents carried boxes of evidence from police headquarters. The raids had been planned with military precision, the timing coordinated to prevent evidence destruction or escape attempts. Agent Carter personally led the team arresting Chief Gaines, who appeared shocked that his power had failed to protect him. The recording was illegal, Gaines protested as he was handcuffed. "Actually," Carter replied, "the governor's office authorized it under state anti-terrorism statutes. Apparently targeting military personnel qualifies as domestic terrorism under Texas law." Across town, Vanessa held a press conference alongside federal prosecutors announcing the charges: civil rights violations, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and, in some cases, accessory to negligent homicide related to Marcus Wright's death. This investigation has uncovered a decades-long conspiracy to systematically discriminate against black service members and law enforcement officers, announced the U.S. Attorney. The evidence suggests coordination reaching into various government agencies, including potential manipulation of military deployments to silence whistleblowers. As the press conference concluded, reporters shouted questions about Senator Maxwell's involvement. The prosecutor's careful response spoke volumes. "The investigation is ongoing and will follow the evidence wherever it leads, regardless of position or political power." Maxwell immediately held his own press conference, denouncing the arrests as politically motivated and denying any knowledge of the gatekeepers' activities. His carefully crafted statement suggested the entire affair was designed to derail his gubernatorial campaign. Behind the scenes, however, Maxwell was panicking. Phone records would show his connections to Gaines. Financial investigations would reveal funding channeled through various foundations to support the gatekeepers' activities. Most damaging, the recording of his conversation about Marcus Wright's deployment could implicate him in a service member's death. 1 year after the chaotic funeral that sparked a national reckoning, Jefferson Memorial Cemetery, now renamed Heroes Memorial Cemetery, hosted a solemn ceremony. The morning sun glinted off marble headstones as hundreds gathered for the dual purpose of completing Captain Marcus Wright's interrupted funeral and dedicating a new memorial wall honoring service members who had faced discrimination. Lieutenant General Vanessa Wright, recently promoted to full general, stood resplendent in her dress uniform, the sun catching the additional star on her shoulder. Beside her stood her father Calvin, daughter Amara, and a coalition of allies who had helped expose the gatekeepers: Agent Carter, Officer Chen, now Lieutenant Chen of the reformed Houston Police Department, Governor Davis, and dozens of veterans whose testimony had strengthened the case against Maxwell and his network. The past year had brought sweeping changes. Officer Reeves had been sentenced to life imprisonment for multiple civil rights violations, conspiracy, and his role in targeting Marcus Wright for harassment. Chief Gaines received 20 years for his leadership role in the Gatekeepers. Dozens of officers across Texas faced various charges, with many accepting plea deals in exchange for testimony about the organization's activities. The most significant transformation had been institutional. The Houston Police Department now operated under a federal consent decree mandating sweeping reforms in hiring, promotion, and accountability. Similar reviews were underway in departments across the state. Military branches had instituted new protections for service members reporting discrimination, with direct channels to Inspector General offices that bypassed potentially compromised command structures. The ceremony began with the completion of Marcus's funeral honors, the moment that had been violently interrupted a year earlier. The honor guard presented the folded flag to Vanessa, who accepted it with tears glistening in her eyes but her head held high. Following the military rites, Governor Davis approached the podium to sign the Marcus Wright Military Justice Act, legislation creating new state-level protections for service members and veterans facing discrimination. This legislation, Davis announced, ensures that no one who serves our nation will face systematic harassment when they return home to Texas. Captain Wright's legacy will be one of justice and lasting change. As the ceremony continued, murmurs spread through the crowd as an unexpected figure arrived, Senator Howard Maxwell. Despite multiple indictments, he had remained free on bail pending trial, his once powerful political machine working desperately to maintain his freedom and reputation. Maxwell's appearance at the ceremony was clearly a calculated move to demonstrate contrition and perhaps influence potential jurors in his upcoming trial. With cameras tracking his movement, he approached Vanessa with practiced humility. "General Wright," he said, extending his hand for the photographers. "I wanted to personally express my condolences and support for this important legislation." The crowd fell silent, watching this dramatic confrontation between the exposed architect of the Gatekeepers and the woman who had brought down his organization. Vanessa didn't take his hand. Instead, she reached into her uniform pocket and withdrew a small digital recorder. "Senator Maxwell, I believe you dropped this after visiting my son's unit in Afghanistan." Color drained from Maxwell's face as he recognized the device. Vanessa continued, her voice carrying across the silent cemetery. "My son wasn't just documenting the Gatekeepers in Houston. He found evidence of your organization operating within military units. Before his death, he recorded your conversation with his commanding officer, where you specifically requested he be moved to an exposed position as punishment for his investigation." Military police officers moved swiftly through the crowd, approaching Maxwell with grim determination. "Senator Howard Maxwell," their leader announced formally, "you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit negligent homicide of Captain Marcus Wright, interference with military operations, and treason." The evidence Marcus had gathered before his death, combined with the recording of Maxwell explicitly requesting his transfer to a dangerous position, provided the final link connecting Maxwell directly to a service member's death. As Maxwell was led away in handcuffs, the crowd's stunned silence gave way to solemn applause. Justice, long delayed, had finally arrived. As Vanessa stood at her son's grave after the crowds had departed, she placed a hand on the cool marble headstone. "We finished what you started," she whispered. "The system that targeted you is being dismantled. Your sacrifice created change that will protect others." A soft breeze rustled through the cemetery's oak trees as Vanessa Wright, general, mother, and catalyst for change, rendered a final salute to her fallen son. The legacy of their combined courage would endure through reformed institutions, new laws, and a generation of officers and service members inspired by their stand against injustice. The Gatekeepers had sought to maintain an old order of discrimination and intimidation. Instead, they had inadvertently created the conditions for unprecedented transformation toward the more perfect union America had always promised to be. General Vanessa Wright's harrowing journey teaches us that systemic racism can exist even in institutions sworn to protect justice and freedom. Her courage demonstrates that challenging entrenched power structures requires more than individual bravery. It demands strategic alliances across different communities and institutions. The story highlights how corruption thrives in darkness, but withers under scrutiny, showing the vital importance of documentation, evidence, and persistence when confronting injustice. We see how a mother's grief transformed into a powerful catalyst for national change, proving that personal pain can fuel systemic reform when channeled constructively. Perhaps most importantly, this narrative reveals that true patriotism isn't blind loyalty but rather holding our institutions accountable to their highest ideals. The gatekeepers believed they were preserving order, but they were corrupting the very principles they claimed to uphold.